Eastern Airlines has denied that its flight attendants were caught on camera having an orgy.
Passengers behaving badly on flights has become an all too familiar sight, with viral videos showing everything from shouting matches to full-blown brawls.
Oh, here, he's civil. What the f***? That blue dragon on my nose?
But what happens when the roles are reversed? From power trips to outright hostility, some airline staff have found themselves in the spotlight for all the wrong reasons. Join us as we dive into the most jaw-dropping moments where flight attendants were filmed crossing the line. Number 9. Flight attendants. Orgy scandal. Flight attendants are often seen as the face of professionalism, graceful, composed, and polished. They represent the airline industry with elegance, ensuring passengers feel comfortable and secure. But that image took a massive hit when a shocking video surfaced online, throwing China Eastern Airlines into a whirlwind of controversy. The footage that spread across a popular Chinese microblogging platform, Weibo, was nothing short of explosive. At least 6 men and women, completely nude, were seen dancing, grinding, and engaging in explicit acts. The atmosphere was wild. Laughter filled the air as the group indulged in an uninhibited display of intimacy. It wasn't just any random party, it was chaos caught on camera. The internet wasted no time in reacting. Speculation ran rampant, with rumors suggesting the video was recorded in Madrid and that the participants were flight attendants from China Eastern Airlines and its subsidiary, Shanghai Airlines. The idea that airline professionals, who are expected to maintain a strict, disciplined image, could be involved in such an outrageous scene made the scandal even bigger. As the footage gained traction, China Eastern Airlines found itself backed into a corner. The company quickly released a statement denying any connection to the individuals in the video. They insisted that their employees had nothing to do with it and dismissed the rumors as completely false. But they didn't stop there. In a surprising twist, they also claimed the video wasn't even filmed in Madrid. Instead, they suggested it was recorded somewhere in Africa, implying that the entire controversy was a deliberate attack on their reputation. Despite their efforts to control the narrative, skepticism remained. Some believed the airline was covering up the truth, while others questioned why they were so quick to shift blame. The internet wasn't convinced, and the debate continued to rage on. The situation escalated even further when Chinese authorities stepped in. News articles about the scandal disappeared from local media, and discussions about the incident were heavily censored on social media. The term Eastern Airlines 6P, which had become a trending topic, was suddenly one of the most restricted search terms on Weibo. The government was doing everything it could to suppress the story. But censorship doesn't erase curiosity, it fuels it. The harder authorities tried to bury the controversy, the more people wanted to talk about it. Screenshots, re-uploads, and private discussions kept the scandal alive, proving that once something hits the internet, it never truly disappears. With so much uncertainty surrounding the video, the truth remains unclear. Were these really flight attendants from China Eastern Airlines, or was it all just a case of mistaken identity? Regardless of the facts, the airline's reputation took a major hit. Number 8. Mother and kids attacked by flight attendant. Passengers at San Francisco International Airport were ready for a routine flight to Dallas on American Airlines. It was supposed to be just another trip, boarding, takeoff, and landing. But for one mother, her 2 young children, and everyone on board, things took a shocking turn before the plane even left the ground. As people found their seats and settled in, a mother of twins tried to bring a stroller onto the plane. She had been told by a female flight attendant earlier that she could check for storage space, but if none was available, she would need to check the stroller at the gate. Seeming reasonable, she did as instructed. But as she attempted to store it, a male flight attendant suddenly intervened. Without warning, he moved in quickly, insisting the stroller was too big and not allowed on board. Before she could even respond, he grabbed at it. What happened next left the entire cabin in stunned silence. The flight attendant yanked the stroller from her hands with such force that it nearly struck one of her babies in the head. Passengers who witnessed it gasped in shock. One woman, Olivia Morgan, immediately reacted, calling him out for his aggressive behavior. She shouted, "What are you doing? You almost hit that baby!" Instead of calming the situation, the flight attendant turned his anger toward her, snapping at her to stay out of it. By now, tension in the cabin had risen to an unbearable level. The mother, overwhelmed and shaken, stood frozen in place, trying to hold back tears while comforting her crying babies. Other passengers began murmuring among themselves, clearly disturbed by what had just happened. The mood had shifted from excitement for the journey ahead to disbelief and outrage. One man, unable to stay silent, decided to step in. He confronted the flight attendant directly, making it clear that if he had been treated that way, he would have fought back. "If you do that to me, I'll knock you flat," he warned. The flight attendant didn't back down. Instead, he squared up, pointing his finger and stepping closer to the passenger as if daring him to make a move. The cabin felt like it was about to explode. At that moment, crew members and other passengers jumped in to defuse the situation. The mother, still visibly shaken, clutched her children while trying to compose herself. The entire scene was chaotic, and by the time things finally settled, the damage had already been done. It didn't take long for news of the incident to spread. A passenger had captured the aftermath on video, and once it hit social media, outrage followed. American Airlines had no choice but to respond quickly. The airline wasted no time in suspending the flight attendant involved. In an official statement, they apologized to the mother, her children, and everyone else on board who had witnessed the shocking event. They admitted that the situation had been handled poorly and assured the public that they would be reviewing their policies and procedures to prevent something like this from happening again. For the mother, the trauma of the experience wasn't something that could be erased. However, American Airlines attempted to make amends. They upgraded her and her children to first class on the next available flight, ensuring they would travel in comfort. In addition, they gave her a $1,000 flight voucher as compensation for the distress she endured. The incident left passengers shaken and the airline scrambling to do damage control. But beyond the apology and the compensation, it raised serious questions about how airlines handle customer service and conflict resolution. One thing was certain: this was a flight no one on board would ever forget. Number 7. Alaska Airlines flight attendant fired for twerking. Nell Diala, a flight attendant for Alaska Airlines, never imagined that a simple TikTok video would cost her job. It all started when she decided to record herself twerking on an empty plane while waiting for the captain to arrive. In her mind, it was just a fun, harmless video to celebrate the end of her probationary period as a flight attendant. She posted it on TikTok with a playful caption, thinking it would make her followers laugh. But things quickly took a turn for the worse. The video spread fast, drawing mixed reactions. While some found it entertaining, others questioned whether it was appropriate for a professional working environment. It didn't take long before the airline's management caught wind of the clip. They weren't amused. Alaska Airlines has strict policies regarding employee conduct, both on and off duty, and social media behavior is taken seriously. Diala was called in for a meeting with the airline's higher-ups, where she was informed that her actions had violated company policy. They argued that her behavior was unprofessional and could damage the airline's reputation. Despite her attempts to explain that it was just a light-hearted moment, the decision had already been made. She was fired. Her dismissal sparked a debate online. Many people felt that the punishment was too harsh, pointing out that the video was recorded during her break and that no passengers were present. Others argued that airlines have a right to enforce professionalism, especially in an industry where safety and customer trust are paramount. Some current and former flight attendants even chimed in, sharing their own experiences of strict workplace rules and how easy it was to lose a job over minor infractions. Diala herself, took to social media to express her disappointment. She defended her actions, questioning why dancing on an empty plane was such a big deal. Her followers flooded the comments with messages of support, and some even started a petition demanding that Alaska Airlines reinstate her. However, the airline stood by its decision, stating that employees are representatives of the company at all times and must uphold a professional image. Her story serves as a cautionary tale about how social media can impact a person's career. In an era where anything posted online can go viral, employees, especially those in highly visible industries, have to be extra careful about what they share. While many people sympathized with Diala, the incident made it clear that airlines take their image seriously, and even a seemingly harmless dance video can lead to unexpected consequences. Number 6. Flight attendant who insulted a passenger. Thomas Todd and his wife Jen boarded Flight 1260 from Orlando to New York, expecting nothing more than a routine trip. They had no idea they were about to be caught in a heated confrontation that would see them removed from the plane. The issue started as they searched for space to store their bags. The overhead bins near their seats were full, so they placed their belongings in the first-class section. A minor decision, or so they thought. But things quickly took a turn. As the plane prepared for takeoff, the flight attendants began their safety demonstration. At that moment, one of them turned to Thomas and made an unexpected remark, telling him that watching the video might teach him something. Thomas, who was already watching the screen in front of him, found the comment unnecessary and pointed it out. Instead of moving on, the flight attendant shifted her focus to Jen and made a remark that left both of them in shock. Startled, Jen asked her to repeat what she had just said. Without hesitation, the flight attendant doubled down, saying, "I'm from the Bronx and you don't want this." It was a bizarre and aggressive response. Sensing that the situation was escalating, Thomas pulled out his phone and started recording. In the video, Thomas can be heard questioning the flight attendant about her words, clearly upset by the way they were being treated. Rather than de-escalating, she accused them of being rude from the moment they boarded the plane. The tension grew as Thomas tried to defend his wife, reminding the flight attendant that he had recorded her insult. But she didn't seem to care. "I don't care," she shot back. "You've been rude since the moment you got on." The heated exchange continued, drawing the attention of other passengers. But it didn't last much longer. Moments later, the couple was told they would have to leave the plane. According to the flight attendant, she no longer felt safe with them on board. Escorted back to the gate, Thomas and Jen were officially removed from the LaGuardia-bound flight. Just like that, what should have been a simple journey turned into a frustrating ordeal. As they stood in the terminal, likely in disbelief, one thing was clear: their trip was not happening again. Number 5. Drunk flight attendant. From the moment passengers boarded the United Express flight from Chicago to South Bend, something felt off. Most people don't pay much attention to flight attendants beyond a polite greeting, but this time was different. Something wasn't right. Aaron Sherb, one of the passengers, noticed a flight attendant leaning against the galley, avoiding eye contact and seeming unsteady on her feet. At first, he brushed it off. Maybe she was just tired. But as more passengers settled in, it became harder to ignore. When the flight attendant began the safety announcement, her slurred speech raised eyebrows. Her words were jumbled, difficult to understand, and at times, completely incoherent. Then, as she walked through the aisle to check the overhead bins, she started stumbling, bumping into seats and even passengers. Now, everyone was watching. Sherb knew this wasn't normal. He pulled out his phone and started recording. His video would soon make its way around the internet, shocking thousands. In the footage, the flight attendant is seen struggling to stay upright. Later, she slumped into her seat, completely out of it. Passengers exchanged nervous glances. Who was really in charge if something went wrong? Would she be able to handle an emergency? At one point, a concerned female passenger noticed that the flight attendant wasn't even wearing her seatbelt. Instead of waiting for her to fix it, the woman reached over and buckled her in. A flight attendant too out of it to fasten her own seatbelt? That was a first. Sherb, frustrated and uneasy, decided to take action. He walked up to the cockpit and informed the pilots that the flight attendant was clearly in no condition to work. The pilot assured him they were handling it, but to the passengers, that wasn't much comfort. The person meant to ensure their safety couldn't even stand straight. When the plane landed in South Bend, it didn't take long for authorities to step in. Local police arrested the flight attendant, later identified as Julianne March. She was charged with public intoxication, a misdemeanor offense. As the investigation unfolded, the truth was even worse than anyone expected. March's blood alcohol level was 0.204, a shocking 5 times over the legal limit for flight attendants. To put that into perspective, the Federal Aviation Administration sets the alcohol limit for aviation-sensitive jobs at 0.04. She had completely blown past that. The incident quickly became national news, sparking a much bigger conversation about substance abuse in the airline industry. Just days before, 2 United Airlines pilots had been arrested in Scotland for showing up drunk before a flight. Passengers on that United Express flight may have landed safely, but the situation raised serious questions. How could something like this happen? What if there had been an emergency? And most importantly, how many times has something like this gone unnoticed? The scandal put pressure on the airline industry to reevaluate its alcohol policies and improve support for employees battling addiction. Because if a flight attendant could show up to work drunk and still make it onto the plane, what else was slipping through the cracks? Before we continue, it's time for today's subscriber's pick. Take a look at this picture. Something doesn't quite add up. One moment she's dressed elegantly in a blue dress, and the next, she's in a bikini at a urinal. This photo raises more questions than answers. Could it be a couple caught in the moment? If so, doing this mid-flight is definitely pushing the limits of public decency. And while the dress alone isn't proof she's a flight attendant, the setting makes it all the more intriguing. What do you think is really happening here? Let us know in the comments. Number 4. Flight attendant kicks woman off plane. Tiana Foff was looking forward to a smooth flight from Phoenix to Oregon. With her 2 children waiting for her back home, she just wanted to settle in, relax, and get through the trip. But instead, she found herself at the center of a humiliating ordeal. One that ended with her being kicked off the plane while stunned passengers watched in disbelief. Tiana had just boarded the American Airlines flight and was organizing her carry-on in the overhead bin. Passengers were still getting to their seats, and the flight attendants were making their rounds, preparing for takeoff. Everything seemed normal, until one flight attendant's tone changed. "Take your seat now," he snapped. Tiana didn't react right away. Was he talking to her? She hadn't heard her name, and he wasn't looking directly at her. She assumed he was speaking to someone else. After all, she wasn't causing any problems. But when she didn't move fast enough, the flight attendant's frustration boiled over. "I said, take your seat." Passengers nearby turned to watch. The mood in the cabin shifted from calm to tense. Tiana, now realizing he was speaking to her, quickly tried to finish adjusting her bag before sitting down, but the flight attendant was already fuming. Before she could fully process what was happening, he was back, and this time, he was done waiting. "Come with me. You need to get off this plane." Tiana's heart started racing. What? Why? Confused and panicked, she pleaded with him. She hadn't done anything wrong. She wasn't being disruptive. She had simply misunderstood his instructions. Passengers were now whispering to each other, some shaking their heads in disbelief. Others looked genuinely disturbed by what was unfolding. "What is going on?" someone murmured. A woman in the row behind her spoke up. "She didn't do anything!" But the flight attendant wouldn't back down. "If you don't come off now, I'll have to call the officers," he warned. Tiana, overwhelmed and fighting back tears, couldn't believe this was happening. Was she really being threatened with police over something so small? At that moment, the tension in the plane reached its peak. Passengers had seen enough. A few began booing the flight attendants' behavior. Some called out that this was unfair and unnecessary. "This is ridiculous!" someone shouted. Another passenger pulled out their phone and started recording. But despite the public outcry, Tiana was left with no choice. She had to leave. With her head down and eyes filled with tears, she grabbed her belongings and walked off the plane. The video of the incident soon went viral, sparking outrage on social media. People were furious at how poorly Tiana had been treated. American Airlines eventually issued an apology, admitting that she had been treated unfairly. They even offered her financial compensation. But for Tiana, the damage was already done. She was still shaken by the experience and unsure if she would take legal action. What she did know, though, was that she never expected to be humiliated for something as simple as adjusting her luggage. Passengers who witnessed the incident promised to hold the airline accountable. Many vowed to never fly with American Airlines again. Number 3. Flight attendant threatens passenger with jail term. Brian and Brittany Shear were looking forward to flying back home to Los Angeles with their 2 young children after a trip to Maui. But what was supposed to be a routine flight turned into a nightmare that left them stranded, frustrated, and facing an outrageous ultimatum. The Delta flight was packed. As passengers squeezed into their seats and overhead bins filled up, tensions were already running high. The Shears had purchased an extra seat for their 2-year-old son, planning to let him sit comfortably rather than holding him on their laps for the long flight. That extra seat had originally been booked for their 18-year-old son, who had taken an earlier flight home. But just before takeoff, a flight attendant walked over to Brian with unexpected news. His 2-year-old couldn't sit in the seat. The airline needed it for another passenger. Confused, Brian explained that they had paid for the seat, fair and square. His son had a ticket, and there was no reason he shouldn't be allowed to use it. That's when things took a shocking turn. The flight attendant's tone shifted from firm to threatening. She warned Brian and Brittany that if they didn't give up the seat, they would be arrested. Not only that, but their children could be taken away and placed in foster care. The Shears were stunned. Give up their son's seat or risk getting arrested and losing their children? The situation escalated fast. Other passengers turned to watch as the argument played out. Some whispered in disbelief. How could this be happening? Brian stood his ground. He told the flight attendant that Delta had oversold the flight and was now trying to take back a seat he had already paid for. He expressed his frustration at how unfairly his family was being treated, but it didn't matter. In the end, the Shears had no choice. They were kicked off the plane, stranded in Maui with their young kids. Finding last-minute accommodation wasn't easy, and to make matters worse, they had to buy brand new plane tickets for a flight the next day. The entire ordeal left them exhausted, angry, and completely disheartened. Not long after, Brian shared his experience online, and the video of the incident spread like wildfire. People were outraged. The idea that an airline could force a paying customer to give up their seat and then threaten them with legal consequences was shocking. Brian explained that his family had been forced off the flight because Delta overbooked it and needed the extra seat. However, Delta had a different version of events. The airline denied that overbooking was the issue. Instead, they claimed the Shears violated policy by trying to transfer a ticket from one passenger, their 18-year-old son, to another, their 2-year-old. According to Delta's website, tickets are non-transferable, and passengers must sit in their assigned seats. That was their official stance. But to many, the question remained, why was a father forced to choose between giving up his child's seat or facing such extreme threats? The incident sparked a larger discussion about airline policies, customer rights, and how far airlines are willing to go when faced with overbooked flights. Number 2. Flight attendant kicks a 2-year-old off a plane. The COVID-19 pandemic changed air travel in ways no one could have imagined. Airlines introduced strict rules to keep passengers safe, and Spirit Airlines was no exception. Their policy required everyone, including children over 2 years old, to wear a face mask for the entire flight. It was meant to protect everyone on board, but for one Jewish family traveling from Orlando to Atlantic City, it turned into a nightmare they never saw coming. The family, made up of a pregnant mother, a father, and their 2-year-old daughter, had boarded the plane like any other passengers. They found their seats, got comfortable, and prepared for the trip ahead. But what should have been a normal flight quickly turned into an upsetting ordeal when a flight attendant approached them with a serious expression. Passengers nearby noticed the tension right away. The flight attendant accused the family of not following the mask rule. The father, trying to understand the problem, lowered his mask slightly to speak, but the flight attendant wasn't focused on him. Instead, she pointed at their little girl, who was sitting quietly on her mother's lap, eating yogurt. The mother looked confused. "She's just 2, she said, her voice filled with disbelief. The flight attendant insisted that the child needed to have her mask on. The mother tried to explain that her daughter had only recently turned 2 and was doing her best to keep it on. Other passengers started paying attention, noticing that plenty of other young children on the flight weren't wearing masks either. Sensing the growing tension, a man nearby, who had been filming the entire incident, tried to step in. He assured the flight attendant that he would personally make sure the father kept his mask on properly. But that wasn't enough. The flight attendant stood firm. The family had to leave. The father looked around the cabin in disbelief. "Have I been wearing my mask?" he asked the other passengers, pulling it up and down a few times to prove his point. Several people nodded. "Yes, you have." Still, the flight attendant wouldn't budge. She warned the family that if they didn't leave willingly, the police would be called. The mother pleaded again, her voice breaking. "She's just a baby." The plane felt heavier with every passing second. Frustration built in the air as passengers realized what was happening. Whispers spread through the rows. Some people shook their heads. Others spoke up, calling the decision unfair. Despite the family's desperate attempts to stay, the flight attendant walked away, making it clear that they were no longer welcome on the flight. The mother and father gathered their things, their faces filled with frustration and sadness. Their son, who had special needs and was seated nearby, looked on silently. The father mentioned that even the captain and most of the passengers seemed fine with the situation, except for one particular passenger who had complained. As the family stepped off the plane, police officers were waiting. One officer could be heard saying, "They're the problem," as the family passed by. But later, the Orlando Police Department clarified that while officers had been called, they didn't take any action. They only observed. After what felt like an eternity, the family was finally given a warning and allowed to reboard the flight. For most people, a trip on an airplane is just a way to get from one place to another. But for this family, it became a painful memory of embarrassment and frustration. What should have been a simple journey turned into an ordeal they would never forget. Number 1. Flight attendants saving a troubled woman. A disturbing incident unfolded aboard Alaska Airlines Flight 2221 at Oakland International Airport when chaos erupted just moments before takeoff. A male passenger suddenly grabbed a woman's hair, sparking a violent confrontation that forced a flight attendant to take drastic action. According to reports, the altercation occurred on February 1st at 10:35 a.m., just as the flight was preparing to depart for Portland, Oregon. Video footage of the incident quickly went viral, showing the aggressive passenger refusing to let go of the woman despite efforts to pull him away. With no other option, a flight attendant intervened, striking the man in the throat and chest to force his release. As the situation escalated, the passenger let out loud screams while crew members rushed to move the woman to safety. Another flight attendant stepped in to help restrain the unruly man while the plane returned to the gate. Due to the disruption, the flight was ultimately canceled, and authorities arrived to take the suspect into custody. Following the incident, Alaska Airlines issued a statement confirming that the man has been permanently banned from flying with both Alaska Airlines and its regional partner, Horizon Airlines. The airline suggested that the passenger may have been experiencing a violent medical episode leading to his erratic behavior. Alaska Airlines commended its crew for their swift response, emphasizing that their actions ensured the safety of everyone on board until law enforcement arrived. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.